This could either end good or bad. Those are really the only two options. Tanner inspecting the hardware again.
That's right.
Give me your opinion.
I'm impressed.
You're impressed.
I'm impressed.
It's just an eBay header.
Dude, cheap eBay. How much was it?
I think they were like $150 for the pair.
For the...
Yeah. They don't work. I mean, they don't fit, but I think there's something to start with. And they seem to be pretty thick enough tubing. I mean, they're not ultra thick, but like in there, you look at those runners, they're not bad. I think I'll definitely put support brackets on it though. But
Yeah,
they're decent.
$150 for the pair.
Yeah, $150 for the pair.
What's happening, everybody? I'm getting ready to show you the current progress. I've got about 50 hours into this so far, and I also wanted to show you what tools I use throughout this process. So I have used a full pound of 308 stainless fill rod and a full gas bottle. I'll show you the size of it that I use to do this. So I got a little bit of practice. I'm feeling a little better about those welds, and I also made some extra parts that I'm about to show you. So first, I'm going to start by showing you the tools that I used for this project. It's not really anything too special. Basically, what you see here on this bench, some gap, some TIG welding on this header. This is the driver's side. It's cooling right now, I just welded it, but this side had a little bit of a gap. Has a little more over there. This is the setup I've been using. I just got some of these. I've never tried these before. They're the purple ones. Usually I use the greens and the reds, and the last batch I got these gold ones. And I don't really notice a difference. I don't know which ones are which. They're all pretty dead though. I'm not the greatest TIG welder. I'm still kind of learning on this, but I just sharpened 3 of these. We're gonna give them a shot. Ground them to a point. I don't have a bench grinder, so I've been using chuck them up in a drill, spin it on the 2nd speed, and then in the other hand, hold this dude like so, one of those sandpaper wheels, and then spin them both, and it gives you a pretty good point. So this is the torch. I've been using this round for stainless. I've been using this number 8 cup. See if you can see that. I've also been using a gas lens. So this is the lens right here. So this is a conventional collar, and apparently this helps you be able to use less gas. I don't know. I can tell you that I had to cut that last runner out to clear this AC box. The non-AC trucks, this box right here is smooth. Might give you a little better clearance, but even so, this runner here is a serious offender because you can't get a wrench onto that spark plug. There is no way to install that and remove it except by hand. There's no socket that I've found that will fit over there well. It's too tight up in there. I could bend this primary runner, but since I have clearance issues on the back already, I'm probably going to cut this back runner and plumb it into there, and take this runner and plumb it into here, so swap these two. This is the heater box removed. Got a new heater core in there. Motorcraft, original. And here's the passenger side manifold. I got a little happy on that weld with the flange, so it's warped. I'm gonna change that out, but this last runner's got a little bit of a gap. If you look at it from the top, that needs to be cut down a little bit so that that sits more flat. And after I do that, then I'll have to weld it for the passenger side, and I put this one tack welded it on the driver's side. This is the factory 302 Explorer manifold. People really seem to dislike these. The cast versions are significantly better. I think like in 98 or 99 they changed from a tubular to a cast, and it actually has decent ports. I was thinking about modifying this, but I'll show you what I did instead. So that is a modified off-the-shelf header. It's pretty thin-walled tubing. I'm going to add some support bracing between here and here, and cut this flange off and weld that one I just showed you on that side. This side, we've got a staircase supporting the turbo, which is partially tacked in place. Pretty good clearance next to the AC compressor, but I'm gonna have to cut out the inner fender a little more. And I'm gonna have to do something about this today. This is the oil dipstick tube, and probably straighten it out. I've already straightened it out a little bit, but it's just a matter of getting it snaked down in there. And I'm gonna try to see if I can get all 8 spark plugs in finally. It's been a while, so hopefully there's no surprises there, and this thing should be coming out again soon. Okay, I have the gasket on there. Just pushing it down in these corners into that sealant a little bit. And I'm noticing something interesting, that this gasket has an extra rib on it. It's got these that hook onto the block. Those seem fine. This one's okay. Just try to move it over a little bit. However, this one's keeping it from sitting flat, so I might have to trim that off right there. The oil feed setup is a brass cross. This is an 1/8 inch NPT, and then I believe the block is either a 1/4 inch. I don't know, these fittings I had laying around, but just so you can kind of see, this is very similar to what I did on the 302, except I used a T on the 302. But these two lines are both 4AN, and then the drains are 10. So you can kind of see how those things sit outside of the engine bay. The engine mounts are Ford Explorer 302 factory plates. I had to cut this one and kind of re-drill them to get them to make to get them to work with the 3-liter V6 mounts in the truck. There's the other side. These dudes. So this one had a spacer on it with the 3-liter. I had to take the mount out. It was underneath here, and take the spacer out to get them more level. It's a T56 Magnum, new Motorcraft heater core, and I am going to measure the ride height with no engine and compare it to having an engine. Now I can adjust the rear ride height with an onboard compressor. Right now it's at 40 psi. So I'm going to measure this without an engine and then with an engine, and measure this gap. And the reason is because I'm considering putting a pair of lift coils in it to give it this ride height all the time, where the front's a little higher, because the new downpipes get kind of close to the upper control arms. This is a 98 coil spring suspension with stock springs, and the AC box removed. There's actually a lot of space in here. I've cut these fenders out quite a bit at this point. I'm still running a stock steering shaft. That's where it's hitting the steering shaft. So I'm going to try to smash that down a little bit. It's already been kinked right there for the bolt clearance, but see if we can get it hot enough.
probably hit it with one more weld right there. Get this thing good and hot, fire this up, keep it hot, and then smash it. The front dress is off an Explorer 96 to 01. It's very compact compared to the trucks in the Fox body, but it does make the turbo placement a little bit more difficult because the AC compressor sits real close to this header. So you can see the finished product outside the bay, how wide it actually is, and I'll show you again what it looks like inside the engine bay. But the oil drain lines are complete. I had to weld a couple bungs in there. One piece silicone rubber gasket. They say don't use silicone. I definitely use silicone. This is an oil cooler, factory one. I think in '98 they got rid of this and just went to an elbow with no coolant flowing through it. This one had a dipstick provision in the pan. This aftermarket pan out of a Crown Victoria application, I believe 80s, late 80s. The block's out of an F-150. You can see the oil dipstick tube. This is the one I'm going to use. This is more like an Explorer setup. This is the one that the Crown Vic uses. They sell this swap pan with a dipstick and a pickup tube for these swaps, but I didn't buy that. It's a breather setup. I haven't bolted these valve covers down, but I took two of the passenger side valve covers that have the oil fill baffle, and this is going to be the breather for the passenger side. And then I cut the neck off because there's a brake booster right in this region that kind of blocks where this tube, this fill neck came out. So I'm still waiting on the weld fitting to weld on top of this. So there's a baffle under there. I've just welded this on without a baffle before, and it sprays oil out. So the baffled valve cover is definitely a necessity. Getting ready to put the intake on as well. But yeah, that's it. Okay, we have this tack welded in there, and the engine has spark plugs. But there's a catch. That number 7 cylinder, I had to remove the manifold to put the spark plug and boot on, so I'm going to try to heat that thing up and dent it again, get a little more clearance. Okay, so I took this out. This is where the spark plug is hitting, like right on the very bottom. So I'm basically going to continue that dent over to about here, smash it in as much as I can, and then I'll have to do some little reforming on that flange. That's not quite fitting, but I'll weld it here and here and maybe over here a little bit, and then form these out so that it fits the flange a little better, because that's a big gap. I'm not going to try to weld that, especially on a flange. Alright, I got this turbone bolted down, getting ready to weld across here and here, and as you can see, I've got 4 bolts holding that flange down, because I'll show you what happens when you don't do that. That thing is tightened and it is warped, and I could smooth this out with a belt sander. I've done that in the past. I'll probably just cut this off and replace it though instead, and that way I can use these 2 bolts here to make a bracket to support it. Trying to get a downpipe to snake through here, so I turned the steering wheel all the way to the right. I'm glad I did, because it really reveals how much clearance or how little clearance there is. So my plan is to run the downpipe down underneath this AC box right here and bring it between this control arm. I want to have some clearance between this control arm so it doesn't get hit if, you know, this suspension bottoms out. I don't want the downpipe to be the first thing to go. But I'm going to try to bring it up close to this frame and then back out and then try to clear that box. It's gonna go something over in there. So that's the project for today. And I got the oil dipstick tube mounted. I need to make a mounting bracket to go from this AC compressor to this flange to hold the turbo on this side and on the other side. The engine has all 8 spark plugs in it, finally, and all 8 spark plug wires. So there's still a little more clearance I need to do on the valve cover, but I did heat that last tube up and smash that in a little bit, so it gave me a little more clearance that was much needed over there, but getting a little closer. This is the exhaust, stainless steel, 2.5 inch diameter, factory Ranger catalysts, flex sections, and 2 hangers that both bolt to the cab. There's a dual core aftermarket all aluminum radiator. It's like the 5th radiator I've had to put in this truck because the plastic end tank ones always leak. Here's the intake that's going on. This is a Typhoon lower. These are Siemens Deca 80 pound-hour injectors. The 302, I had the same injectors but 60 pound-hour. You can get these with either connector type, the square, which is what the earlier Explorers used, Fox body Mustangs, and the later round one, US Car I think it's called, or it was ZV1. US Car is the round version. That's the later version of injectors for the Explorer. My harness has the square one, so I just got these square ones. I did a regulator block off and welded a fitting for the fuel return line, and this is just going to be a feed. My truck's returnless, as all 98 Up Rangers are. It's a factory Explorer GT40P throttle body. I have to rotate it because normally it sits with the idle air control on the top like that. That does not clear the hood, so I'm rotating it 90 degrees, making a new throttle cable. I'll show you that. This is a factory Explorer elbow, which just so happens to bolt to this Edelbrock 5-liter upper intake manifold. So this setup lets me use my stock charge pipe on the top, which is great. I would definitely do this again. The other option that you have on these is to use the Explorer upper intake, this dude, and then use a Ford Lightning lower. Since the 351 is wider than the 302, the lower intake off of 302 will not work. So here's how the throttle originally sits. And like I said, I turned this thing 90 degrees. And then it's a whole front dress assembled on the old engine. Here's the old exhaust manifolds. These were built from a Lincoln Mark 7 that were flipped upside down, and since I flipped them upside down, the internet says that these things just work out. You can turn them upside down, no problem. Well, that might be the case on these individual flanges. If you have a one-piece flange, usually you're going to run into spark plug interference issues. Even with these manifolds and stock heads, I had to slot these holes out to get these ports to line up. So you can kind of see that. So just so you know, the 302 and other small block Fords, the Windsor series, you cannot flip these things upside down and have them perfectly line up. They're not symmetrical. Without slotting these holes, you will have alignment problems. So there's the driver's side. This one's very, very tight for clearance around the steering shaft over here. But again, both these were built off Lincoln Mark 7s, and other pieces I had laying around kind of similar to the new setup. I had to pretty much build them from scratch to get them to clear everything. So we're doing a new comparison. Before it was with the 302 or the turbones die first, and now it's the 351, is that right?
That's right.
The 351 versus the turbones. All right, Tanner, you got a guess on how long this is going to take? Give me an estimate. Give me a quote. What are we in for?
Just getting it bolted to the transmission and mounted to the truck. Not oil, everything like that.
Yeah, just this portion.
I'll throw a gauntlet in for
An hour.
an hour. Hour and a half. Hour
What's the time?
and a half.
Times 341. 341.
Hour and a half.
Hour and a half, so.
30 minutes.
All right, let's give it a go. I'm gonna say we get it in there by, what is it, 3:41? I bet you we have that thing aligned and a couple bolts sent home by 4:20. 40 minutes, I'm gonna cut that in half.
All right.
You get an undercut.
All right. Let's make it happen, Captain.
Well, Tanner, if you lose, that means that you're gonna lose the job. You're gonna go out of business.
I'm going out of business.
If somebody can undercut you that
Oh,
much on
that's-
this job.
We're talking shock time here, man.
All right, well, let's get to it.
They should clear that.
All right, we're off to a good start.
And you know what? I'm sold on operator precision. The Asher operator precision.
It dented that cage, dude.
What?
It definitely dented it. This is dented the little rib. Put some weight on it.
No.
Where? Where? Right in the middle where that jack stand was. All right, Tanner, what's your guess on the time?
This thing, that trans isn't that heavy though, is it?
Tanner, what's your guess on the time?
We're not in that. We're not done yet, are we?
We got 2 bolts in. What's your guess on the time? I know the answer.
It was probably only 20 minutes.
So your guess being?
20 minutes. It's a lot faster than I thought.
It's 4:05. You're pretty right. 20 minutes. I was wrong. I would go out of business too. I would have totally overbid that job, or I would have made money, and you would have gone out of business, and I would have taken your business and still doubled it. Hopefully that wire holds. We don't get too much vibration.
It's a little bit louder.
It is. I hear exhaust.